Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This is the story of restoring the balance of the force with PowerShell Remoting. My name is Brian Cafferkey, and before I get into this saga, I want to point you to the link at the bottom of the screen. I have an account on GitHub, so github.com/bcafferkey/shared. And underneath there, you will find all of the content for the presentations I do online and sometimes for other things for like user groups, etc. So you'll find that as well as any of the code samples I use. A little about myself before I begin. I'm a technical solutions enabler from Microsoft, which means I'm kind of consultant in the sense that I talk to customers about what they're trying to do and make sure that they find the correct, amazing solutions really that are available these days on cloud, on-prem, whatever it is they need. Make sure they match it up to their needs as well as educate them on the proper use of the tools and the best way to leverage them. I have decades of IT experience in healthcare, insurance, banking, and e-commerce. I'm a past two-time Microsoft MVP, 2016 and 17. One was on the Cloud and Data Center platform, probably because most of my PowerShell work. And the other MVP award, the last one, was actually data platform. So I kind of do a lot on both. I'm the author of Pro PowerShell for Database Developers book, available on Apress. I found and lead the past chapter, the Rhode Island Microsoft Business Intelligence User Group, as well as the Greater Boston Area Data Science, Machine Learning, and AI Group. Both are managed on meetup.com, so if you're interested and you're in the area, just look them up there. You can join them anyway, because sometimes I'll do virtual things or webinars, and so you can even attend remotely to some sessions. I'm a frequent presenter at technical conferences and user groups, and please reach out and connect in. I like to connect on LinkedIn. That's really my most active social networking media, but I do some tweeting on Twitter, and there's my @Brian Cafferkey account. And please subscribe. The more subscribers, the better. It makes it easier for me to see who's interested in what I'm doing. And please comment, give me feedback if something's working, something's not working, what you like. To be honest, this presentation is a result of comments I've gotten. I've been doing a lot more machine learning and data type focused topics, but I keep getting great comments saying how much they like the PowerShell. And I love PowerShell too, so I decided it's time to do more videos back on PowerShell again. I will also say that this is a bit of a segue because I've been doing a lot of presentations, even full-day workshops on PowerShell automation, both Azure automation with PowerShell as well as on-prem like DBAs and sysadmin type of work with PowerShell. This topic is really a segue into the ability to really use PowerShell to properly do that kind of wide-scale implementation or use of PowerShell. So, cost-a plug for my book. This book is not so much a moneymaker for myself, trust me, but I wrote it because it's, I believe, the most in-depth coverage of PowerShell anywhere. And I say that having looked at a lot of books. There's some great books out there, but this goes really in depth into as many features, deep dive into technical details about how PowerShell works, as well as long, extensive scripts that are meant to demonstrate as much as possible the programmability of PowerShell. So hope you'll take a look at that and get the ebook for saving money here. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, chaos reigned and everything was done manually. But the force was to be brought into balance with a new generation of PowerShell masters. Automation, scale, and peace would reign in the galaxy once again. The goals of this presentation are: what is PowerShell Remoting and why do we need it? I'm going to discuss security concerns because after all, we're connecting to other machines and doing work, which I'll explain. So reasonably, we need to think about security. How do we set it up and how do we use it? Those are the goals of this. Of all the things I've talked about PowerShell, everything so far has been very much understanding how PowerShell operates, what the concepts are. This presentation really is starting to open up the true possibilities of PowerShell. It's not just anymore about the PowerShell language, it's about the power of PowerShell. So why PowerShell at the beginning? I always have to plug it a little bit to kind of explain why PowerShell is so important. Because if you work in IT, and it's gotten to the point where it doesn't even matter where in IT, DevOps, developer, DBA, IT administrator, whatever it is, without PowerShell, you're going to have a harder and harder time doing your job because management expects more and more from their resources. It's basically the ability to scale. It's getting even more so on cloud environments like Azure, but even on-prem, there's the need to do more and more with less. Competition means you can't just keep hiring more and more people as you get more servers and things. So the ability to scale up what you're doing instead of manually doing work and be able to automate that work, that's where PowerShell comes in. And without it, you're going to be like the person on the left, stressed out, overworked, not able to keep up. But with PowerShell, you can be like the person on the right. If you go from being a PowerShell Padawan to being a PowerShell Master, then you can be the person on the right who's able to handle all of this stress, all of the workload, very sort of effortlessly, because you know how to automate and you can scale it up. What is PowerShell Remoting? In a nutshell, PowerShell Remoting is the ability to connect from a client machine to other machines to submit PowerShell commands or scripts, which is just a file of commands. That's the key, because if you can, to be able to run it on your own machine or to log into a server and run a script, that's great, but it's just one machine. If you have to administer 100 or 1,000 machines, some DBAs have 1,000 or 10,000 databases they need to administer. It's not practical to do that manually. And the ability to use remoting is the ability to scale it up and connect to all these different machines to run commands. So there's the real possibilities there. And we can run these commands synchronously or asynchronously. I like those words, but they're not the most intuitively obvious what they mean. Synchronously simply means that it's going to run one after the other. So we can run a command to a machine and say, I want to wait until it's done. So, run this command, wait, run the next command. That's synchronously. Asynchronously means I'm not waiting for things. Run this over here, run this over here. They can run in parallel and they don't have to end at the same time. And that's something we can also do in PowerShell, which is really important because we may want to submit commands to say do a patch to 1,000 servers, we'll say. It'd be nice to be able to send them to all the servers and let them all do it when they can and finish when they will and not have to wait for each one. We can run in batch mode and we can run in interactive mode. So again, the power of this, the capability allows us to really reach out, connect, and manage the environment. PowerShell Remoting is absolutely central, and ironically, I haven't really talked a lot about it. Online or even in my book, I don't cover it a great deal. I wish I did more. I do talk about it a little bit because I focus more on the PowerShell concepts. But PowerShell Remoting, the nice thing is, once you get it down, it's not a big topic really. It's just a matter of now you can do it remotely. You can run PowerShell commands over the internet or within your network and connect to any number of servers and run commands. So kind of keeping with the theme, interconnected are all things, and PowerShell is the force that binds everything together. So this slide, which I've used in other places, so you may have seen it, this slide is showing PowerShell as kind of a hub. But I'm going to say think of it more like as a client machine, your machine. And in your environment, you have file systems, Exchange servers, Active Directory machines, SharePoint, and you want to connect to all these different machines. Maybe you need to apply a Windows patch to all of them. You want to connect to, say, the IIS machine. Maybe there's a problem, the app's not working right. You need to reboot one of the servers. Maybe you need to connect to Azure and do some administration. PowerShell is that hub that can do all those things. And you can do it all from your own single machine, which is really what's great about it. So kind of this is more of a low-level dive of the same slide. But what do I mean by that? For instance, this shows the PowerShell Center here connecting to Mary Smith's computer to get an event log. Maybe Mary's having trouble and she called and said, I'm having trouble accessing something. So you get the event log. You can do that remotely. Somebody else, you're looking at a dev server and you need to invoke a command on the dev server maybe to install a patch. And maybe you're going to restart a service on another machine, something's not working. Maybe you restart SQL Server. John Doe's having trouble, so you say, well, let me check if I can connect to his machine. So you do a test connection. And that little thing on the enable PS remoting, that's what actually is what we're going to look at, is how we tell a remote machine that we want to allow people to connect and use PowerShell to it. All secure, of course. I want to talk, though, before I get into this is sort of my disclaimer. And I'm going to try to do this as much as I can. I'm not a security expert. I'm a data person. I focus on solutions. I know a good deal, a fair amount, I think about security, but I'm not a security expert. So you need to make sure that whatever you do, it's safe, it's secure. I recommend, I'm doing everything in this demo with dev machines that have no production no production data, nothing I'm really worried about. I'm going to take them down. I'm bringing them down right after the demo. So I'm not really something I have to worry about too much. But if you're doing stuff on premise or in the cloud or in your Azure accounts, be very careful. My recommendation is start with test machines, start with stuff that has no production data on it, etc. So you can learn. When you're ready to do anything with production, go to your IT, whatever the people, the powers that be in your organization, and make sure that whatever you're doing complies to their security procedures and policies. PowerShell is great, and it has great facilities to be secure, but you want to make sure you're following policies to make sure you are being secure. And I think that's especially true, of course, when you're reaching out over the internet to manage things. You've got to be a little bit careful that you've secured things. Now, I've seen some things, and from what I've seen is that like remote desktop computing, we all do it and stuff, and we love that. And PowerShell Remoting has, I think, even better security. It's got the possibilities of integration and security that's a lot more secure in many ways. So it can be a very secure way to do things, but again, you've got to make sure you use it correctly. So it does require that the machine allows other machines to connect. By default, machines do not allow any kind of remoting and connecting. Obviously, for security reasons, that's a good idea. It must have a port, and we'll look at that port, but you have to open up a port from which PowerShell will be connecting, so your machine's going to connect through a port on another machine. Again, review your different settings with your organization's IT security, and again, use it, test machines, etc. Now here's some links, so if you go get my slides on GitHub, you can find these links, but these just give some background. What is the security features? How does it work? Etc. And how do you make sure you're working the most secure way possible? And Jason Helmick is a kind of a PowerShell expert who does a lot of blogging and well known in the PowerShell world. And he has a blog here which I thought was pretty good. It covers a lot of great information, so good job there, Jason. Let's go. So the first thing I want to do, you can do this any number of ways. Maybe you're already in an environment on-prem and you've got virtual machines or you've got servers you want to connect to and do work with, and that's great. And you can follow these directions. The only difference between the directions here and on-premises, you already have your servers ready. You'll need to connect to them. You can use remote desktop, connect to your server, and then follow the instructions that enable remoting. What I'm going to be doing is, to make it easier for me, I'm going to be using Azure Virtual Machines to demonstrate what I'm going to be talking about here. So I would go into the portal and create a virtual machine, and in this particular slide you can see SQL Server Developer I typed in. I like to create Developer Edition SQL Server because I do a lot of work with SQL Server, so it's nice to have it. I have another video which you can find on YouTube which talks about creating Azure Data Science Virtual Machines. Really easy to do, and that walks through step by step how to do that. So if you don't know how to get a virtual machine, you want to play with this, but you don't have anything on-prem to work with, and you want to do this, that's another easy way. You can go into that video, watch it, create a data science virtual machine. You can do that cheaply and bring it down when you're done. You won't pay that much, you'll just pay for when it's running. So data science virtual machine is another way to find that video, and that's a way to get that set up. Because we're going to need to set up a separate machine from our own. And I've tried creating virtual machines on my own box, and I found it to be kind of awkward to try to simulate having separate boxes that way, whereas Azure VMs work really well, and or again, real servers on your own environment are certainly good too. So a quick demo here. If I go, just going to go into my Azure portal, and you can see I've got this here. So I literally just typed in this, and I can click on this, and if I click create, it's going to go through and start walking me through the steps of creating a virtual machine. There's a lot of different settings to things. I will point out that regardless, whenever you create a VM, you're going to have to give it a sysadmin user account and password, and that's a secure password, so it's going to have its policy requirements. Make sure you're ready for something that's secure, resource groups, etc. So you're going to have to walk through those pieces. Again, my video on data science virtual machines works. You can create those and use them, or just go through here and create 1 or 2 virtual machines, however many you want to do your playing around with the PowerShell remoting. So let me close that out. So we created the data. So let me talk now about creating a data science virtual machine. How we're going to enable PowerShell remoting to some machines here. So I've got these BPC numbered virtual machines I've created. The BPC number 4 has not, let me see if I can find it. These things like to disappear on me. Okay, so this one, BPC4, and I'm going to ping it. I'm going to pin it to my dashboard here, and it's running. And you can see I've got an IP address here, which I'm going to need. So what I want to do is I want to enable PowerShell Remoting on this machine. I have 2 other machines already set aside that I've enabled remoting. This one I'm going to walk you through the steps of what you need to do. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to need to insert a new rule. But let me go through the slides first. Mostly for my own use because I keep forgetting what I need to do here. So go back to the slideshow, and from my current slide, first thing I need to do is what the machine is, I need to add an inbound rule. Before I told, one of the things I mentioned, you need a port to be open. So we need to have open 5986. So that's the first thing we're going to look at doing. And let me go back there for a minute. So you're going to go into networking on your VM. This one is not the name of the VM I'm going to look at, but I need to do networking. I'm going to click on that button that says Add Inbound Port Rule. And in there, I'm going to get a little pop-up, and I type in the port ranges. It's going to be 5986. They changed the slide, actually, this pop-up between when I did this. I think it now has source and destination. So I do in the source 5986. Priority doesn't really matter. And then I give it a name and then a description. It doesn't really matter as far as description. And then you see it gets added this 5986 rule. And that's necessary. Otherwise, traffic will be blocked. I won't be able to connect to my machine. Okay, and then once I've done that, now I can connect into the machine using remote desktop. But let me walk through doing the 5986 just to get that piece done. So I'm in here. I'm going to go into my machine. Again, this is my machine I created. You can create this however you want, but that's my machine. And it's pinned to my dashboard so I can find it easily on my dashboard here. So I go in here, and I'm going to go into the networking. These are called blades on the right when I get these details. And you notice I don't have a rule for 5689. So I'm going to add one. So I'm going to say add. And the source range is 5689. Destination doesn't matter. I think normally destination port ranges, I'll just say asterisk for all. Then I'll just put here win RM. All right, so I got all this stuff. I think we're good. Let me check. I forget if this is 5986 or 5986. So I made a mistake. Let me fix this. This should be 5986. 5986. All right, and that's good. Port 5986. I'll change that name. Add. And now you'll see it's up here. You can see the little bell is messages, things going on. So Azure is now creating a rule on my VM to allow access. It says it successfully did that. I'm not seeing it, so let me do a refresh on my browser. And I believe if you want to get to the Azure portal, it's just portal.azure.com. Okay, and now you see 5986. So hopefully I've done this correctly. I've tried this a few times. There's a few steps here, so hopefully we'll get through everything cleanly. But I do have some ones working, so we'll go from there. So now that I have that piece done, the next thing I want to do is go back to my overview. I'm going to go here for my IP address. And I've just did that little cut and paste. So I've got my IP address for that virtual machine. What I need to do now is connect to it. Just paste it in. Say connect. And I need to use the administrator account and password to connect to this. So when I created it, I had to give it a system administrator account and password. So I'm going to use that here. And say OK. And it normally does this complaining. So I'm just connecting to this machine just like you would on premise or whatever, whenever you connect to a remote machine. This is just your usual remote desktop. Now when you use a machine for the first time, when you've just created it or you've restarted it as I have, it can take a little bit. It's good to be patient, kind of wait. It has to initialize itself when it first connects, kind of get things set up. It takes a bit, so let's give it a moment. And the idea once we get into the machine is we need to go into PowerShell, because by default PowerShell Remoting is not turned on. So we're going to use a commandlet called enable-ps remoting along with a few other commands to open it up. But the enable PS remoting is the most crucial. And we need to go in and try to keep this in your mind, because this is something a lot of people forget. We need to go in as the administrator when we start PowerShell. If we start PowerShell the normal way, we won't be able to execute the commands. So we have to start with what they call elevated privileges. Okay, and it always starts in a VM. It always starts in this service manager. Let that finish. All right, takes a second. Give it a couple seconds here. So what I want to do now, you notice it creates a few things in the taskbar. When you first get into the VM, it won't put anything in the taskbar, so it's part of the initializing. You got to give it a minute to do that. I think we're good. I go in here, and I can go down here, and you see I have Windows PowerShell. Typically what I like to do is mouse click on it and then say pin to the taskbar. I like to have the PowerShell ISE available to me, and then once I'm in here I got to right mouse click on the PowerShell ISE and see that run as administrator. Crucial, otherwise we can't do what we need to do here. Okay, here we are. I'm going to click on this. I'm in the ISE, but it doesn't have any text or scripts open. I'm just going to click the open text window here, and I'm going to go over to my client machine, because I have a script there which I put out available to you, limited time only. Just kidding. It's out there on GitHub, but I want to use the setup, and there's a bunch of things here. So I'm just going to, this is the script. I need to cut and paste it into the VM that I'm going to enable. So I'm just going to Control A, Control C, go back over to my desktop, paste it in. So there's some things, these first few commands, and I'm trying to credit people as much as possible. I did not invent these things, and I didn't even know how to do it until I searched around and used Bing, etc., looking for the right blogs. But this blog here does talk about turning on certain commands to allow us to make sure that we can connect. And one of them is this HTTP IP list. Now, I haven't really hit this issue, but I was hitting issues in the beginning, and so this is one of the things I added. If I use NetSH, this is not really a PowerShell thing, but it will work. NetSH, it's going to show me, excuse me, my IP list, or basically what listeners are running. There's no listeners running, but just to be safe, I'm going to run this command and do the set wsman config, which you can do too, and just say yes to this. And it does some things to make sure that we've enabled a listener. That's one of the key things. Now, this whole bunch of stuff, the most important thing happening here is this command here. Let me see if I can, I don't know if this will work. Let's see. Yeah, this will help me. So what I need to show you here is enable PS remoting force. That's the part. The force says, you know, force this no matter what. I want to enable remoting. I have to do a firewall rule to allow the connectivity. Then there's this stuff with the thumbprint, etc. How much of this, I'm not even sure all of this is required, but I find it works when I do this, and it can be a little temperamental getting some of this working. So I'm just going to highlight these commands. The ones with the pound and green, those are commented outlines. So I'm going to run this, and remember I'm running with elevated privileges, and you see it runs with all this stuff here. It's easier, actually. The VMs are a little tricky to work with than if you're on premise. I have found that just doing enable PS remoting works pretty well by itself if you're within a firewall environment type thing. You're on your own premise. But when you're trying to do this, I'm trying to connect over the internet to get to my machine. So it looks like it's all good, and hopefully I've got all the pieces I need. So I'm going to go back here, and I think that's the basic gist of it. All right, now that I've configured this, let me go here. One of the things I need to do also is this command. Sorry, I screwed up that. Let's do edit undo. I thought I still had the IP address, but I didn't. So let me go back to here, and I'm going to go back to this machine. I'm going to grab the IP address, go back to PowerShell. What I need to do here is just to do this set. This basically is necessary to allow my machine, because I'm not on the same what they call subnet. Doing this will allow my machine to access this IP address. Otherwise, for security reasons, it's protecting me from what's called an untrusted source. So I'm going to just run that command. Say yes. Oh, I may need, let me exit. Shows you how just real this really is, real world stuff here. I'm going to right mouse click, run as administrator. When you have problems and it won't let you do something in PowerShell, typically it's because you don't have the privilege you needed to do it. So I'm going to go back here and say use PS Remoting. And let me try it again. Say yes. And you notice now it didn't complain. So again, if you try to do something in PowerShell and it says you don't have the authority, you can't do this, you get the red messages, just go back in as administrator. To do this PS Remoting and things, you will need admin privileges. So if you don't have it, maybe they'll give it to you. But you can certainly play around in your own environment like I'm doing here, and you should be good. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using PSSessions. Okay, and when I connect to a PowerShell session, that's what PS stands for, there's some options here. I need to use this skip CA check and skip CN check. Sometimes you get problems with that if you don't have it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. In my case, I was getting issues with it, and I think again it has to do with the fact that I'm not on the same subnet for some of that, so I'm able to get around it with using these. So this is now an object that I can use. So this is PowerShell object, and I'm going to do a slight detour for a minute if I could. I had somebody asking at a presentation the other day. I talked about PowerShell and why PowerShell is significant in that it streams database objects, collections, etc., not text. It can stream text, but it's really streaming rich objects, and why that's so important. And one of them is because of this, the idea, if I do $SO, period, I'm getting methods and properties of this. These are properties. I'm sorry, these are properties here, and then you've got methods over here, like get type. If you're using something like Bash, I'm not an expert in Bash, but Bash, from what I understand, is more text-based, so it can stream text. It's very powerful, but you don't get actual methods that are created. So PowerShell is built around objects, so there's methods and properties, and that's one of the things that makes it really rich and powerful to work with, because you're actually streaming in a pipeline, and you can grab methods and properties and act on them right in the pipeline. So it's very, it's kind of like a piping version of Python. You know, it does a lot of that kind of thing. All right, so I've created this. Basically, it's a PowerShell set of options I want to use as a parameter. And if I want help on PSSession option, oh yeah, I got this. Okay, I can get it by just saying get help and new PSSession option. And a nice feature of help, I'm throwing some extra tidbits in here. If you do the dash show window, really cool feature, it pops up the help. Instead of just dumping in the console, it'll pop it up in a little help window. And I can scroll through here and get help on all the different options and things in there. So, you know, have a look at that. It's a nice feature. What I'm going to do now is, in order for me to connect, I need an ID and password. That's called a credential, and we're going to create one. All right, so here I'm going to run this and create my ID and my password. All right. And now I have my credential object. What I want to do is I'm going to enter a new PS session. Now I can go, I'm going to show you how to connect in. In fact, let me, yeah, I'll show you a few things here, but I'm going to test getting in. I'm going to jump here for a minute. I want to test getting into this session. Now, this is a different computer, I think, but I just to show you how this works. I want to get into, I'm going to call, it's called Enter PS Session. What it's going to do is it's basically like changing my prompt. So I'm sitting here in PowerShell. You can see it down here, right? What I want to do is switch that console prompt so that it's on a different machine, namely this machine. I'm using IP addresses because I'm running, I don't have the DNS server set up. I don't have all these names registered anywhere. If I was in my own domain, if I was in behind, you know, some organization's firewall, you know, in their environment, it would know the server names and I could use them. but I'm stuck with using IP addresses, which adds some security issues as well, and you'll see different pieces in there. So again, the easiest probably way to do this is running in your own environment with regular server names. But I'm going to say enter PSSession, run it, give it a minute. And what you see here is, notice this piece here. That's telling me that I've actually switched. I'm now on a different machine. I can do things like dir, which is just an alias to list files there. I created a couple of files on that machine. I can do things like get, say get process. So this tells me these are all the processes running on that remote machine. All right, and when I'm done, I can just say exit, and that gets me out. Kind of reminds me of like SSH with Bash or Linux, but I don't want to go too far with that one because I don't know how far that analogy extends. What I do want to point out is I'm using credential, and I created the credential object. I'm just passing that in. I like using those because I didn't have to show you my password being typed. It's not in clear text anywhere. It's only when I entered it, and that was hidden. I'm using SSL, so it's secure. And I'm using those options. Remember, I created the SO option earlier. That's telling me some connecting options that are there, so I passed that in. So that's our first foray, our first example of actually connecting to a remote machine and doing something with it. Okay. This, I want to show a real use case of doing something useful. So what I want to do is, this really happened to me. I was working in a company. I had a very large file. It turns out it was actually the Visual Studio Community Edition. I needed data tools. I needed to do some work on a server. And in order to do, I needed to install the data tools. Unfortunately, the server itself was set up so that I couldn't download data tools from the internet. I couldn't get log into it and run Explorer and download it, etc. I needed to download it on my own machine, then push it over to the server. So, and this can happen. So imagine, I don't know if you've ever hit this, but I kept having problems because I had this large file. It was like about 1 gigabyte. I needed to copy it from my client machine onto a server machine, and I was trying to use like remote desktop, like here, and then go into like file manager, kind of not too quick, but yeah, there it is. But the idea is I go into file manager and then just paste it in. Okay, there it is. So I was actually going like here, imagine, I go to like the documents folder, wherever, and just Control V, so Control C, Control V. And what happened was it kept crashing in the middle. It would get halfway through it, and I'd see a little thing scrolling and tell me it was doing it, and then there'd be a burp in the network connection, or there'd be some problem, and I'd lose it. And it took a long time for it to even get that far. So I found a PowerShell solution. I can use copy item, and this is my local machine, and this is the actual file, and I can tell it I want to go to the C drive, but not the normal C drive, the one on a remote connection. So that was pretty cool. So I could define a remote connection like it's another machine, like it's a drive, and I can say copy it over there. So let me walk through this a little bit. I'm going to create a variable in PowerShell, rs1. It's called new PSSession. New PSSession allows us to create a connection to a machine that we can reuse. So it's kind of like if you use database connections in ODBC or something. You get an object, it's a database connection, and you can send commands through it. Until you close it, it stays available. And I'm going to be using this IP address. And this is the session options again. That's why I created it once. Same credentials I've been using. So I'm going to run this. And that's going to establish essentially a connection object with the other machine. Then what I want to do is I'm going to say copy this item and over to the other machine and kind of watch what happens. So let me clear the screen here. And notice how it comes up, and this is very cool. Now it's very fast. My network connection is a lot better than it was back then. But in this particular case, it sat there. It took about 5 minutes. It was a lot better than it was trying to do the other Control V, pasting. But it basically has moved the file over. And if I go over here, and I can prove it. Actually, I'm going to have to connect to this particular IP address to show what I did. Let me do another remote desktop here. Oh, wait a minute. that's right. Okay, and all this was really just to show you one thing. I want to show you that there it is on my C drive. It copied over. It's an old copy, but the file itself, but you can see it's there. And that's really all I wanted to show you here, so I'm going to close that. So that's pretty cool, just kind of a useful, simple example where you can use PowerShell Remoting. I had to have PowerShell Remoting because I'm establishing a link. I'm saying I'm on my own machine. I want to establish a link with another machine, and it's really cool because it's basically a point-to-point connection that then sends a file over. So it's like streaming the file over, and it works really well. And I had no problems. It didn't give me any errors, although I tried like a dozen times the other way, which did not work so well. All right, let's go down here now. And here I've got some IP addresses. I've got 2 machines. So I'm going to create, what I want to do here is show that I can invoke a command. We've seen some other things. I want to invoke a command, but this time I want to run it over multiple machines. So I'm creating, this is an array. That's how you create an array in PowerShell. Let me just run this. And if I highlight something and execute it in PowerShell, it will just demonstrate. So it shows the values in my array, 2 different IP addresses. Awesome. What I want to do now is I'm going to invoke a command. So invoke command is meant to run commands remotely. You can actually use the local host option as a way to kind of simulate that locally. But I'm just going to use 2 different machines. These are VMs in Azure. And what I want to do is I'm going to pass this list of computer names in. This could be, the documentation says you can do up to 30 machines at one time. And then it will, if you give it more, I believe it will basically chunk them through at 30 at a shot. So I can run the commands. I've got my system options, which I used before. And I'm going to run what's called a script block. Whoops, let me correct my undo. But I'm going to run what's called a script block. A script block is kind of interesting. It's basically like basically an in-stream script. Not completely unlike lambdas in Python, if you're used to those. But really, I think of it as really a variable which holds a script. Or you can just hard code a script as a variable, like a parameter. So we're saying a script block is a parameter. Anytime in PowerShell you see this dash after a highlight that. When you see a dash, that's how you're indicating a parameter. So the invoke command has a parameter called script block. And the idea is I can pass an in-stream script. So here's going to be very short. I'm just saying get process, and I'm saying where the name is win init, which should be there because I tested it. And I guess it has something to do with initializing windows. Use my credentials, use SSL. But since I have 2 computers, I should see that happen twice. So to make sure this all works, I'm going to clear screen so I can see nothing up my sleeve. This is going to work. Run it. And we can see it ran. Okay. Now, how do I know it really ran on 2 machines? Well, it's telling me the computer names here. Now, if it was a real name like, server 1, prod server, it would give those names. But I only used IP addresses. But it shows me that it returned both machines. It got into each machine and returned the instance of process running. So that's kind of cool. Now, of course, we can use that many ways. We could say, is a database service running? Is the WIIS or IIS server running, etc.? We can check it. If it's not, let's run it, etc. So it's pretty cool that way. And that's what I want to demonstrate next. So now I'm going to do something where, remember I mentioned I think of a script block as a variable. That's because it can be. So I'm going to create this variable called $PS script, and it's going to be a script block. Kind of unusual, a very cool thing that PowerShell can do. It's kind of like a function, only it's just a variable, and you're not really, other than the variable name, I'm not calling it a function. So it's indicated by these braces. These are what mark the beginning and end. So I'm creating, and I'll show it to you. I'm going to create this little script, and let me clear so I can show you. If I then just highlight the name of my variable, $PS script, and do that, it dumps out the script. So what's the script doing? It's basically saying get service, SQL Server, and here's a really cool trick if you haven't seen this before. If you wrap a commandlet in parentheses with its parameters, then it actually will return the results, and you can act on it immediately. You don't have to save it. So get service -name SQL Server is going to run the commandlet and find any service running with that name, SQL Server. Because I put in parentheses, there's a property, one of the things returned will be status. So I can directly query the property status from the returning stream. There's many other things returned, but I just want status, so I can just, in closing parentheses, put status. And I can say if it's not equal to running, meaning that service is not running, then what I want to do is this condition, which essentially is going to print a message saying SQL Server is not running, and that's going to stop the service. Otherwise, it's just going to tell me SQL Server is already running. Okay, now I can run this locally by using the @ so this little ampersand script is going to execute that directly. So this is my way of executing. So again, it's kind of like a Lambda function, I think, in Python. Maybe I'm wrong, but it kind of reminds me of that. But it's just a script that I'm going to run with the ampersand. And notice here on my machine, it's already running. I've got several versions running on my machine. So let's try this. I want to do an invoke command. I'm going to do it on 2 computers, because remember we've defined 2 computers. Still there. I'm going to run that script block. What I want to do is I want to invoke that command and say if SQL Server is running, not running, start it. So let's run it. So here it told me it's doing a start service on target because it was not running on those machines. Something else I can do now, I can do a command now here, stop service. Now I want to call attention to something important. I'm going to do more training and more in-depth analysis of what we can do with remoting and just in general administration. But the important thing I want you to take away is that's a great thing from like a DBA standpoint. I want to go out and maybe I have 100, 200, 1,000 machines. I want to go out and check and make sure that the SQL Server is running on all those machines, especially say maybe there's 50 that are production critical. So I can have something run and make sure that everything's running. If it's not, I can just say, well, if it's not running on any given machine, I could send a list, then turn it on and start the service. I could also look at it and say if something is running that I don't want running, maybe I want to look out and say I need to run some sort of a patch or change to the system. And I want to make sure maybe a certain service, could be SQL Server or something else, I want to make sure it's not running so I can apply my patch. And then I run another script and say, okay, now turn it on again. So this is how it gets to be really cool, and we can sort of automate our work. So here I'm going to say, okay, now cycle through the same machines and stop the service. And you can see it's saying it's stopping the service. And I can go back here and turn it on again. And let me just do that. Now it's starting the services. And you can see my message came up. SQL Server is not running. Starting it now. And you can see, so it worked. It's like if it's running, then it tells you it's already running, but if it's not, it starts it. A little cool thing I can also do is this thing called get PSSession, which just tells me what PSSessions I have. So it's telling me I have a remote session currently open that I'm working with. So it's kind of a good way to monitor things. Oh, so another thing I want to show you is, so that kind of shows you some of this is running, cycling through different machines. I can also do this thing with as job. So what that means is, and I think hopefully I have a presentation I've done, but if not, I have to do one. PowerShell has a whole pretty elaborate job scheming system, job system. And there's 2 types of jobs in PowerShell. There's scheduled jobs, and there's just on-the-fly jobs. If you've used Linux, then you've seen cron. It's a little like cron, but the scheduled jobs actually have a scheduler. There's an interface because it's actually Task Manager in Windows, Task Scheduler, whatever. You can, and you'll see the jobs show up if you schedule them. So you can say daily, nightly, just like cron, but it's a visual interface in Windows. Or you can just run them immediately in batch, which we're going to do here. And so that will allow you to run things in background mode, basically. So let's try it. So I'm going to run same thing I did before, basically, but this time, and notice if I want to continue a line, if I have to go into another line, I can just use that little tick mark, which on my keyboard is just above the tab. But let me run this, only I'm going to say the big difference here is as job. Let's see what we get. So let me clear this again out so we can see what's coming back. And you can see it says remote job, it's running. Now the cool thing is when it's done, now we'll do get job and see what happens. When is it done? Now it says it's completed, okay? So we can see the job's completed. It just numbers it. I have all the jobs, so just named it job name job 6. So I'll just change this to job 6. Get job just gets you a list of jobs out there. You can parameters to limit what jobs you want. Here I'm going to say receive job and give it a name. If I don't say keep, the output of the job, the messages, will be deleted. But the main thing I want to show here is that, well, let me do it and you'll get a better idea. We can see these verbose messages, okay? Those verbose messages are coming from 2 different machines. So the takeaway from this is when I run commands to different machines and I use the job option, all the messages come back to the one machine. So what's great with the PowerShell Remoting is my machine is the parent or the hub, and it does all this work, but all the messaging, all the coordination is coming from my machine. And when I do it in batch mode, it gives me back all the messages of what it's doing. So it's kind of cool. I can do logging, I can do whatever. I can kind of see what's happening. So if it was 1,000 machines, I can actually look centrally and say, okay, it did it on that machine, it did it on this machine. I didn't lose it. It didn't go out there and do it, and then I don't have any way to know it did it. So that's kind of a nice feature of that. So we've seen a lot of things we can do. We can run things in batch mode. We can run them directly. We can give it a list of computers, or we can do one. We've got a lot of different things we can do here. So a lot of cool stuff. And yeah, I think that's most of what you need. And what was the... do want to do one more thing here. So I've got this. Let me go back here. I think we'd set up a new one over here. VM4. So let me just check that again. And we add the network. Remember, we added the rule. So let me go. There's another place I can get the IP address, but I'll go here. I'm going to go here. Make sure I got that. Yep, there it is. So I've already added the rule for that. So let's just test that and see if it works. Okay, so why did it do that on this particular thing? Okay, so I had to take a little bit of a break there, and I wanted to look at something. So when I tried to enter this PSSession thing, this is the computer we originally set up, and it should have worked. I just wanted to demo it, and I did something wrong. So I want to walk through what I did wrong, because I'll show you something kind of important. When I started this, this screen changed. Originally it was a very simple screen to do the port ranges, and originally it just had a single port. Then literally in the process of doing this, it changed to having a screen with source and destination, or source and target type of ports. So that confused me a little bit, and so I entered it incorrectly, but I want to make sure I show you the correct way to do it. So let me go to the port, and what I did is, this is my my VM4. So I'm back into the VM4 on the network thing here, and I removed the rule I had because it was incorrectly set up. So to correctly set up the rule, let's go through that again. I'm showing you here, I just tried to enter this command and it doesn't work. It's got all this red messaging. It says remote server does not connect. And this is kind of the frustrating element when you get into PS Remoting. If any one thing is not perfect, it's just going to give you an error, and the errors are not necessarily helpful. Though I did end up binging and searching around to find the right solution. So let me clear this out, clear the screen, go back here, and I want to create an inbound rule. This is great practice for me too. So I got confused and thought that it's the source port that mattered. It's not. It's actually the destination port. So I want 5986 in the destination port. These just leave as is. And you notice this looks different, and so it actually changed. They changed the parameters. I guess they gave you more options, made it a little more flexible, but it did throw me for a loop. And here I'm going to say 5986, just so I know what it is. And it's Windows Remote Manager, so Windows Remote Management. That should do it. So I'm going to add that, and it's going to create the rule again. And I just want to show you so you don't fall, that I can save you from the pain I went through doing this, and it works hopefully for you. And now you can see this is created. And the important thing is when you're done, you should see under the port, it should be 5986. It actually said any, and I had to delete it. So let me go back to PowerShell. And I should be able to run this command now because this is the IP address for that machine. And I should be able to just enter into a PowerShell session with that box. And I did. Great. So I can do what I did before, dir, get process. That's all there is to it. And again, you can tell I'm in it because of this. It shows the IP address switching. When I'm done, I can just say exit. So I wanted to show that. And that's really important because without that, you're not going to be able to get things to work the way I showed you. So let's go back now to our slides. And I'm going to pick up where we left off. And so again, when you get this, this is the slide originally I had. You notice it's much simpler. When I just did this literally just a few days ago, this is the way the screen came up when I wanted to enter a new inbound rule. But they added basically a source and a destination rule now. So focus on the destination for this purpose. You want to, so where it says I put port ranges and I just put 5986, now you need to do that where destination is. And then you can see it here, and the key thing is notice under port number it says 5986, so you can see the port rule is correctly set. Again, if that's not set correctly, you're going to get the errors, the red messages and stuff. It's not going to let you connect. So it's really important to get that right. And then we kind of walking through connecting through remote desktop. You just start remote desktop, copy in the IP address from the VM or wherever you're getting it from, or the computer name if you have that. And you need to use the administrator ID and password to get in, at least if you're using a VM as I am. And then you can connect in, and then it gives you a warning about certificates, and you can just kind of say that's okay, let me in. And when you get to this screen, just give it time to connect, set up. It can take a few minutes for it to initialize things. This is the first time if you're doing like I did and you create a new VM. It might even be good to just take 5 minutes, go get a cup of coffee, come back, things should be all set up. You'll notice because the bottom task bar will start to show items appear. This is a data science VM, so it's installed a lot, but even on just a regular VM with SQL Server Developer, it's got some things to install. And again, kind of walking through this enabling remoting, we did PS remoting. We need to, on the VM, we're logged in to that virtual machine or wherever it is. We're logged in, and on that box, we use remote desktop to get in. Cut and paste the script I gave you, or load it, download it, and run it. And this script will enable all the things necessary. It does the PS remoting enabling, creates the net firewall rule, does a few things in there. So it gets everything running, so it should be set up correctly. However, what I did wrong was that 5986 piece, I have to do that in the portal. And once I do, I'm good to go. And I already did the demo, so I'm in kind of a reverse order for that. But look down also at the blog by Timothy Warner. It's got some really good information too about enabling PowerShell remoting. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And again, setting up PowerShell remoting is a bit tricky. I find every time I do it, it seems like I find one thing I forget to do right. So I'll be honest, I find it a lot of playing around a bit. But walk through this. I have all the steps here to get through it. And so take a look at this, and you should be able to get it set up and working, and then kind of play with it. It's just a bunch of pieces that have to be in place. But I think you can see the value of it. Once you have remoting set up, it's really great. The difficulty in this case is almost all because it's a VM. It's not on the same subnet. It's going over the internet, so you have a lot more work to do. If you're doing this behind a firewall in your own environment, it's actually really easy because I've done it where I just literally just type in PS enable remoting and boom, it's done. So good. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe to see more of these. Add comments to what you like, what's working, and thank you.